It was a damp, gray morning when the forest guard stumbled upon her. The woods of Blackwood were dense, shrouded in mist, and notorious for their eerie stillness. He was making his usual rounds when he saw what he first thought was a bundle of rags nestled against the roots of a towering oak. But as he drew closer, his breath caught. It wasn't just a pile of forgotten clothes. It was a young girl, barely 12, with matted hair and skin so pale it seemed to glow against the muddy ground. Her body was battered, cuts and bruises marking her like a map of some terrible journey. She was unconscious, her breath faint but present, and no one knew who she was or how she had ended up in such a state. The guard acted quickly, calling for help. Within minutes, the sirens wailed through the morning fog, carrying her to the Pinewood Memorial Hospital. When she arrived, chaos erupted. The staff at Pinewood were used to emergencies, but there was something about this girl that set everyone on edge. She had no identification, no wallet, no phone, not even a scrap of paper to hint at her identity. Her injuries were severe, but they told only half the story. The marks on her wrists suggested restraint, while the faint scars across her back hinted at long-term abuse. Yet, the most unsettling detail wasn't physical. It was the peculiar, almost otherworldly glow her skin seemed to emit under the fluorescent hospital lights. Doctors and nurses gathered around her, each searching for answers. Was she a runaway? A victim of foul play? Her fragile state made it impossible to question her, and every test they ran only deepened the mystery. Her blood work was strange, showing anomalies the lab couldn't explain. Her fingerprints didn't match any in the national database. She was, in every sense, a ghost, a lost soul with no past, and, if they couldn't stabilize her, possibly no future. Amidst the confusion, one nurse couldn't look away. Jack Morrison was in his late 30s, a dedicated professional with a reputation for taking on the toughest cases. Something about the girl struck a chord deep within him. Maybe it was the way she clung to life, despite the odds, or perhaps it was the silent plea etched into her delicate features. Whatever it was, Jack found himself drawn to her bedside, vowing silently that he would uncover the truth. Jack began documenting everything, her vitals, her reactions to treatments, even the faint whispers she sometimes muttered in her sleep. It was during one of these quiet moments, late at night when the rest of the ward was still, that Jack noticed the faintest shimmer across her skin. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was real, and it wasn't normal. Still, the hospital wasn't a place for speculation. Procedures had to be followed, paperwork filed, and questions asked. But as the hours turned into days, no one came forward to claim the girl. No family, no friends, not even a neighbor who could say they'd seen her before. Her presence was a puzzle, and every passing moment felt like another piece slipping further out of reach. But Jack couldn't let it go. The mystery gnawed at him, keeping him awake long after his shifts ended. He started to dig into missing person reports, local police records, even old newspaper archives, but nothing matched. The more he searched, the more it felt like this girl had simply appeared out of nowhere. 1 week after her arrival, things took a chilling turn. A man arrived at the hospital, dressed in a long black coat and carrying himself with an air of authority. He asked for the girl by name Emily. The staff were stunned. No one had revealed her name, not even Jack. The man's appearance raised immediate suspicions. His demeanor was calm, almost unnervingly so, but there was a sharpness in his eyes, a predator-like focus that made Jack's stomach twist. The man claimed to be a private investigator hired by the girl's family, but his story was riddled with inconsistencies. Jack noticed a strange tattoo on his wrist, a triangle enclosing an eye, its design intricate and strangely mesmerizing. When questioned, the man dodged, redirecting attention back to Emily and insisting on seeing her. Jack's instincts screamed at him to intervene, but he was just a nurse. He had no authority to stop the man from speaking to the girl, yet something told him this stranger was not who he claimed to be. The encounter left a cloud of unease over the hospital, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that Emily's life was in imminent danger. Late that night, Jack sat by Emily's bedside, watching over her as he had so many times before. Suddenly, her eyes fluttered open wide, terrified and filled with a pain far too deep for someone her age. Her lips moved and Jack leaned in, his heart pounding. Her voice was barely a whisper, but the words she spoke sent a chill down his spine. "Run." Before he could react, her body convulsed, sending alarms blaring throughout the ward. Doctors and nurses rushed in, scrambling to stabilize her, but Jack's mind was elsewhere. "Run," she had said. From what? From whom? And why? As the medical team worked tirelessly to save her, Jack knew one thing for certain. Whatever secrets Emily held, they were dangerous enough to make a little girl fear for her life, even in her unconscious state, and dangerous enough to pull Jack into a mystery far darker than he could have imagined. But who was Emily really running from? And what did the mysterious man with the triangle tattoo truly want? As Jack begins to piece together the clues, he finds himself facing a terrifying truth one that will force him to confront his own fears and risk everything to protect her. Don't go anywhere. The answers are only just beginning to unfold. The events of that night lingered in Jack's mind, an ominous shadow that refused to dissipate. The word Emily had whispered, "Run," echoed in his thoughts, compelling him to act. But what could he do? He was just a nurse, bound by protocol and limited resources. Still, he couldn't ignore the unease gnawing at his conscience. Determined, Jack began spending every free moment by Emily's side. Her condition was stable but fragile, and she remained unconscious, slipping in and out of fitful murmurs. The strange glow of her skin persisted, growing more noticeable in the dim lights of the hospital room. It wasn't just odd. It was unearthly, as though her body was radiating some unknown energy. And while the other staff dismissed it as a side effect of her trauma, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that it meant something more. As the days passed, the mystery deepened. Jack noticed something peculiar. Emily seemed to react to certain sounds, particularly the hum of the hospital's old fluorescent lights. Her body would tense ever so slightly, her fingers twitching as if reaching for something unseen. Intrigued, Jack began documenting these reactions in meticulous detail, hoping they might provide a clue to her condition or her past. But Jack wasn't the only one watching. The man in the black coat, who had introduced himself as Mr. Kane, returned to the hospital, this time accompanied by two others. They were dressed similarly, their movements synchronized like a well-rehearsed dance. Each wore the same triangular tattoo on their wrist, and their presence sent a wave of unease through the staff. They claimed to be conducting a private welfare check on behalf of Emily's family, but when questioned for proof, their answers were vague and evasive. Jack's instincts told him to stay away, but he couldn't. He made it a point to observe them from a distance, noting their sharp gazes and hushed conversations. It wasn't long before he caught one of them sneaking into the restricted archives, rifling through patient records. That was the last straw. Jack reported the incident to the hospital administrator, but by the time security arrived, the men were gone, leaving behind only a lingering sense of foreboding. The next day, Jack took matters into his own hands. During his lunch break, he logged into the hospital's database and searched for anything unusual in Emily's case file. What he found stopped him cold. Her lab results were flagged as classified, with an access level far above his pay grade. The blood anomalies he had noticed earlier were labeled undetermined origin, accompanied by a cryptic note. Patient exhibits bioelectrical signatures inconsistent with human physiology. Jack stared at the screen, his heart pounding. What did that even mean? Was Emily not entirely human? The thought seemed absurd, but the evidence was right in front of him. And if it was true, what did it mean for her? Was she in danger because of what she was, or because of what someone thought she might be? That night, Jack stayed late at the hospital, poring over every piece of information he could find. He scoured missing person reports, medical journals, even conspiracy forums, desperate for anything that might shed light on Emily's condition. But every lead seemed to raise more questions than answers. It was as though she existed in a void, untethered from the world around her. As the hours stretched into the early morning, Jack heard a faint noise coming from Emily's room. He rushed in, finding her awake for the first time since her initial collapse. Her eyes, wide and shimmering with fear, locked onto his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with a trembling voice, she whispered, "They're coming." Before Jack could respond, the hospital's power flickered, plunging the ward into darkness. Alarms blared as emergency lights sputtered to life, casting long, ominous shadows across the walls. The air was thick with tension, every sound amplified in the eerie stillness. Jack's pulse quickened as he realized the hospital's security system had been disabled. Someone was here, and they weren't patients. Jack acted on instinct. Grabbing Emily's fragile frame, he wrapped her in a blanket and wheeled her bed toward the nearest exit. He didn't know who they were, but he wasn't about to find out. As he maneuvered through the dimly lit corridors, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed behind him. They were closing in. The chase was a blur of adrenaline and desperation. Jack used every ounce of his experience to navigate the labyrinthine hospital, ducking into supply closets and doubling back to throw off their pursuers. Emily clung to him, her small hands gripping his sleeve as though her life depended on it. And perhaps it did. Finally, Jack reached the ambulance bay, where an old delivery van was parked. With no time to lose, he hoisted Emily into the back and hotwired the vehicle, a skill he had picked up in his reckless youth but never thought he'd need again. The engine roared to life, and they sped into the night, leaving the hospital and its horrors behind. As they drove, Emily began to speak, her voice hoarse but urgent. She told Jack about a place called Hope Harbor, a name that stirred faint memories of a news story he had read years ago. It had been described as an experimental orphanage, a sanctuary for displaced children. But rumors had swirled about unethical practices, secretive funding, and children who vanished without a trace. Jack listened intently, his mind racing. If Hope Harbor was connected to Emily, it could explain the strange anomalies in her blood work and the men who were after her. But it also meant they were up against a powerful organization with resources far beyond their own. As the van barreled down the empty highway, Jack felt a surge of determination. He didn't know where this journey would lead, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let anything happen to Emily, not while he was still breathing. What exactly was Hope Harbor, and how was Emily connected to it? As Jack delves deeper into her past, he uncovers a web of secrets that threatens to unravel everything he thought he knew. But the closer he gets to the truth, the more dangerous the journey becomes. Stay tuned, because the next chapter will take us straight into the heart of the mystery and the danger. The drive away from Pinewood Memorial Hospital was tense and silent, save for the hum of the old van's engine and the occasional groan of its aging suspension. Emily sat curled in the passenger seat, wrapped in the oversized hospital blanket, her eyes darting nervously toward every shadow they passed. Jack's hands gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles white against the dark leather. His thoughts raced with questions, but he forced himself to focus on the road. There would be time for answers later, if they could stay ahead of whoever was pursuing them. An hour later, Jack pulled into a deserted rest area off the highway. He killed the engine and exhaled deeply, leaning back in his seat for the first time since their escape. Emily's breathing was shallow but steady, her fragile form almost swallowed by the blanket. Jack turned to her, speaking softly. "Emily," he began, his voice steady but urgent. "I need you to tell me everything you can. Who were those men? Why were they after you?" For a moment, she didn't respond. Her gaze was fixed on the dashboard, her hands clutching the edges of the blanket as though it were a shield against the world. Then, slowly, she looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "They call it Hope Harbor, she whispered, but it's not. It's not what people think it is. Jack leaned closer, his pulse quickening. What do you mean? What is it? Emily swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she continued. They take kids. Kids like me, orphans, runaways. They say it's a safe place, that they'll give us homes, families. But it's a lie. They use us for experiments. The word hit Jack like a punch to the gut. He struggled to process what she was saying, his mind flashing back to her classified lab results and the anomalies in her blood work. Experiments? What kind of experiments? Emily's face tightened, her expression haunted. They're trying to change us, make us into something else. They said it was for science, for the future, but it's wrong. It hurts. And the ones who don't survive. Her voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. Jack felt a surge of anger rise within him. How could anyone do this to a child? He clenched his fists, fighting to keep his emotions in check. Emily, he said gently, do you know who's behind it? Who's running Hope Harbor? She shook her head. I don't know their names. They wear masks, uniforms. But there's a symbol, the same one that man had. The triangle with the eye. It's everywhere. Jack nodded, his suspicions confirmed. Whoever these people were, they were well organized and relentless. And now they knew Emily was still alive. That made her, and by extension, him a target. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Jack made a decision. They couldn't stay on the run forever. If they wanted to survive, they needed answers. And the only place they could find them was Hope Harbor. The journey to Hope Harbor wasn't easy. Jack relied on scraps of information, old articles, vague rumors, and Emily's fragmented memories to piece together a possible location. It was rumored to be somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, hidden deep in the woods like a fortress. But the exact coordinates were a closely guarded secret. In the meantime, Jack and Emily moved from one safe house to another, relying on Jack's old network of friends for shelter and resources. These weren't ordinary friends. They were people Jack had met during his years as an army medic, a past he rarely spoke about. They were fighters, survivors, and above all, loyal. Each one reacted with shock and anger when Jack told them Emily's story, and each one offered their help without hesitation. But even with their support, the journey was fraught with danger. On more than one occasion, they narrowly escaped ambush, their pursuers always one step behind. The men with the triangle tattoos seemed to be everywhere, their network vast and far-reaching. Jack began to realize just how powerful the organization behind Hope Harbor truly was. One night, as they camped in an abandoned cabin deep in the forest, Emily opened up about her time at Hope Harbor. Her memories were fragmented, like pieces of a broken mirror, but they painted a chilling picture. They kept us in cold rooms, she said, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. Everything was white, the walls, the floors, the lights. They said it was to keep us sterile, but it felt empty, like a cage. Jack listened intently, his heart heavy with anger and sorrow. What did they do to you in those rooms? He asked gently. Emily hesitated, her small hands gripping the edge of the blanket. They tested us, our blood, our bones, our brains. They made us do things, run, climb, solve puzzles. They wanted to see how far we could go before we broke. Jack's jaw tightened. He could only imagine the trauma Emily had endured, the pain she had been forced to suppress just to survive. You're incredibly brave, Emily, he said, his voice firm. But we're going to make sure no one else goes through what you did. I promise. The promise was a heavy one, but Jack meant every word. He knew the road ahead would be dangerous, but he also knew they couldn't turn back. If they wanted to stop Hope Harbor, they had to confront it head on. But what exactly was Hope Harbor hiding? And how deep did its operations go? As Jack and Emily get closer to uncovering the truth, they'll face a series of challenges that will test their courage, their loyalty, and their will to survive. What they discover will change everything, and it might just be the key to exposing the organization's darkest secrets. Stay with us, because the revelations are about to take a shocking turn. The road to uncovering Hope Harbor's secrets was anything but straightforward. Jack and Emily moved carefully, avoiding towns and sticking to back roads, their every move shadowed by the unshakable fear of being found. Emily's fragile condition forced frequent stops, but Jack's resolve never wavered. He was determined to keep her safe, even if it meant putting himself in harm's way. Their first real breakthrough came when Jack managed to locate an old newspaper article about Hope Harbor. It described the facility as a sanctuary for vulnerable children, with state-of-the-art facilities and a mission to provide a bright future for those in need. But the article also hinted at controversies, allegations of mistreatment and unusual levels of secrecy surrounding the organization's operations. Jack couldn't ignore the eerie parallels to Emily's story. One name stood out in the article: Dr. Franklin Dawes, a biochemist and the supposed visionary behind Hope Harbor. According to the piece, Dawes had disappeared years ago after an investigation into his work was abruptly closed. The article suggested that he had been conducting unapproved genetic experiments, though no charges were ever filed. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Could Dawes still be involved, working from the shadows to continue his twisted research? Using a network of encrypted communications, Jack reached out to an old contact, a journalist named Carla, who specialized in exposing corporate corruption. Carla had a knack for finding the truth buried beneath layers of lies, and Jack knew she'd be their best shot at uncovering Hope Harbor's true purpose. When they finally met in a secluded diner off a desolate stretch of highway, Carla was cautious but intrigued. She listened intently as Jack recounted Emily's story, her sharp eyes darting between him and the young girl who sat silently at his side. By the time Jack finished, Carla was visibly shaken. "Jack, this is bigger than anything I've ever worked on," she said, her voice hushed. "If what you're saying is true, we're dealing with a criminal enterprise that spans years, maybe decades. And if they're targeting kids..." Her voice trailed off, the implications too horrifying to put into words. Carla promised to dig deeper, starting with the financial records and public filings associated with Hope Harbor. "They can't hide everything," she said confidently. "There's always a paper trail." While Carla began her investigation, Jack and Emily continued to lie low. But the respite was short-lived. One night, as they camped in the dense woods near a small town, they were ambushed. It started with the faint rustle of leaves, almost imperceptible against the background of chirping crickets. But Jack's instincts, honed from years of fieldwork, kicked in immediately. "Get down," he whispered urgently, pulling Emily to the ground just as a dart whizzed past them, embedding itself in a nearby tree. The tranquilizer's intent was clear. They wanted Emily alive. Jack's heart raced as he scanned the darkness, his ears straining to catch the sounds of their attackers. Shadows moved among the trees, their outlines barely visible in the moonlight. They were closing in, coordinated, and relentless. With no time to waste, Jack grabbed a small flare from his backpack and ignited it, tossing it into the underbrush. The sudden burst of light and heat startled their pursuers, giving Jack and Emily a crucial window to escape. He scooped her up and ran, weaving through the trees with the precision of someone who had trained for survival in hostile environments. They ran until Jack's legs burned and Emily's ragged breathing forced him to stop. They found temporary refuge in an abandoned ranger station, its broken windows and decaying furniture offering scant comfort but much-needed cover. As they caught their breath, Jack assessed the situation. "We can't keep running like this," he said, his voice low but firm. "They'll find us again, and next time, we might not be so lucky." Emily nodded, her wide eyes betraying the fear she tried so hard to suppress. "What do we do?" she whispered. Jack's jaw tightened. "We take the fight to them." The decision to confront Hope Harbor head-on was not made lightly. Jack knew they couldn't do it alone. He reached out to Carla again, sharing the details of the ambush and asking for her help in coordinating a plan. Carla responded with urgency. She had uncovered something explosive, a network of offshore accounts linked to shell companies, all funneling money to Hope Harbor. The names on the accounts included high-ranking officials, prominent scientists, and even a few military contractors. "This isn't just an orphanage," Carla said. "It's a front for something much bigger. And based on what I've found, they're not just experimenting on kids, they're weaponizing them." The revelation hit Jack like a freight train. Weaponizing? It explained the anomalies in Emily's blood work, the unnatural glow of her skin, and the men's relentless pursuit. Emily wasn't just a victim. She was a key to whatever dark agenda Hope Harbor was pursuing. Carla arranged a meeting with a whistleblower, a former Hope Harbor employee who had fled after witnessing the horrors within. The man, a timid and pale figure named Robert, agreed to talk under strict conditions of anonymity. When Jack and Emily met him in a secluded location, his trembling hands and darting eyes betrayed the depth of his fear. "They're creating hybrids," Robert said, his voice barely audible. "They're using genetic splicing to combine human DNA with traits from animals, plants, even microbes. They want to create a new generation of superior beings. Soldiers, spies, weapons. Emily was one of their early successes, but she escaped before the process was complete." Jack's stomach churned. The implications were staggering and sickening. "How do we stop them?" he demanded. Robert hesitated. "There's a facility deep in the mountains. That's where they conduct their experiments. If you can expose what's happening there, you might be able to bring them down. But be careful, they'll kill anyone who gets too close." Jack glanced at Emily, whose pale face was set with determination. He knew the risks, but he also knew they had no choice. If they didn't act, countless others would suffer the same fate as Emily or worse. The path ahead was clear but treacherous. Jack and Emily would have to infiltrate the heart of Hope Harbor's operations, facing dangers they couldn't yet imagine. The secrets hidden within the facility could save countless lives or cost them their own. Stay with us as the journey takes a daring and dangerous turn into the belly of the beast. The fight for justice has only just begun. Jack's mind churned with the weight of what Robert had revealed. Hope Harbor wasn't just a rogue facility. It was a ticking time bomb of bioengineered secrets, capable of reshaping humanity's future. Emily wasn't just a child in danger. She was a living key to a dangerous conspiracy. And now, they were about to walk straight into its core. The journey to the hidden facility was harrowing. Carla, working tirelessly from her undisclosed location, managed to pinpoint its general location, an isolated mountain range far from any populated area. Satellite imagery revealed a sprawling compound camouflaged by dense forests, its layout suggesting advanced security measures. We're talking motion sensors, surveillance drones, armed guards, the whole 9 yards. Carla had warned over a secure line. "You'll need to think like a ghost to get anywhere near that place." Jack had no illusions about the challenge ahead. Years of experience as an army medic had prepared him for high-pressure situations, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. He wasn't just sneaking into enemy territory. He was bringing a traumatized child into a lion's den. Before leaving, Jack took time to prepare Emily. She had grown quieter over the past few days, her small frame seemingly burdened by the enormity of their mission. Jack knelt in front of her, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "Emily," he said softly, "I need you to know how brave you've been. What we're about to do is dangerous, but we're doing it for a reason, to stop them from hurting anyone else. Do you understand?" Emily nodded, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to shed. "I understand," she whispered. "I don't want anyone else to go through what I did." Her resolve strengthened Jack's own. He packed their gear carefully: thermal blankets, non-perishable food, a small first aid kit, and a handheld radio Carla had provided. He also carried a weapon, a last resort he hoped he wouldn't need, but couldn't afford to leave behind. The final leg of their journey was a grueling hike through rugged terrain. Jack and Emily moved under the cover of darkness, using the dense foliage to shield them from prying eyes. Jack's sharp instincts and military training kept them one step ahead of potential threats, but the tension was palpable. Every rustle of leaves, every distant animal cry felt like a potential ambush. After hours of trekking, they reached a vantage point overlooking the facility. From their position on a rocky ridge, Jack surveyed the compound through binoculars. The place was enormous, its high-tech buildings stark against a natural backdrop. Guard towers stood at each corner, their searchlights sweeping the perimeter, while drones buzzed overhead in a relentless patrol. Emily crouched beside him, her small hands clutching the edge of the rock. "That's it," she whispered, her voice tinged with both fear and determination. "That's where they took us." Jack lowered the binoculars and looked at her. "You sure?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the compound. "I remember the lights, and the smell like chemicals and metal. It's them." Jack exhaled slowly, his mind racing. Getting in was going to be difficult, but it wasn't impossible. He had faced worse odds before. Still, the thought of exposing Emily to such danger weighed heavily on him. But they were out of options. The longer they waited, the greater the chance that Hope Harbor's operatives would find them first. "We're going to do this smart," Jack said, his voice steady. "No heroics, no unnecessary risks. We get the evidence we need and get out. Understood?" Emily nodded again, her small face set with determination. Jack gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder before turning his attention back to the compound. It was time to move. Using the cover of darkness, Jack and Emily descended the ridge and approached the facility's outer perimeter. Jack had studied the guards' patrol patterns through the binoculars, timing their movements with precision. When the nearest guard turned away, he and Emily slipped through a gap in the fence, an oversight Jack found both surprising and suspicious. Inside, the compound was eerily quiet, its stark white buildings glowing faintly under the floodlights. Jack led Emily to a side entrance, where he used a stolen access card procured by Carla through her contacts to bypass the first layer of security. The door clicked open, revealing a long, sterile corridor. Emily froze, her breath hitching as memories flooded back. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where they kept us." Jack placed a reassuring hand on her back. "You're safe with me," he said firmly. "Let's keep moving." They navigated the labyrinthine facility with care, Jack's sharp instincts guiding them past cameras and motion sensors. Emily's fragmented memories served as a map, leading them to the heart of the operation, a lab filled with rows of glass chambers, each containing a child in various stages of the experiments Emily had described. Jack's stomach turned as he took in the horrific sight. Some of the children were unconscious, their bodies hooked up to machines that hummed with ominous efficiency. Others were awake but dazed, their eyes glassy and unseeing. The chambers were labeled with alphanumeric codes, each accompanied by a chilling note detailing the child's modifications. Jack began snapping photos with a small camera Carla had given him, documenting the atrocities in meticulous detail. Emily stood beside him, her small hand gripping his arm as she stared at the children in the chambers. "We have to help them," she said, her voice trembling. "We will," Jack promised. "But first, we need to get this evidence out." As they worked, an alarm suddenly blared, shattering the silence. Jack's heart sank. Someone had discovered their intrusion. The facility erupted into chaos as guards poured into the corridors, their radios crackling with orders. Jack grabbed Emily's hand, pulling her toward an emergency exit. "We've been made," he said urgently. "Stay close to me." The next moments were a blur of adrenaline and terror. Jack and Emily raced through the facility, narrowly avoiding capture at every turn. They were almost at the exit when a familiar figure stepped into their path. The man with the triangle tattoo, his cold eyes locking onto Emily. "You've gone too far, Mr. Morrison," the man said, his voice calm yet menacing. "Hand over the girl, and I might let you walk out of here alive." Jack positioned himself protectively in front of Emily, his jaw set. "You'll have to go through me first," he said. The man smirked. "That can be arranged." The standoff has begun, and Jack must summon every ounce of courage and resourcefulness to protect Emily. But can they escape the clutches of the man who has hunted them so relentlessly? And what other dark secrets does Hope Harbor hold? The truth is about to come to light, but it may come at a terrible cost. Stay tuned. The fight for survival is far from over. Jack's pulse pounded as he stared down the man blocking their escape. The sterile, clinical light of the hallway reflected off the man's cold, sharp features. Behind him, 2 guards stood poised, weapons drawn but not fired, a deliberate choice. They wanted Emily alive. "Step aside," Jack growled, his voice low and dangerous. His hands clenched into fists, the weight of everything they'd been through sharpening his resolve. The man's smirk widened, his calm demeanor unshaken. "You're brave. I'll give you that. But bravery doesn't win against inevitability. She belongs to us." Jack shifted slightly, positioning his body to shield Emily. "She belongs to no one," he said firmly. "If you want her, you'll have to kill me first." The man raised an eyebrow, amused. "I was hoping you'd say that." Before Jack could respond, the man barked an order, and the guards advanced. Jack moved quickly, grabbing a steel lab tray from a nearby cart and hurling it at the guards with precise aim. The makeshift weapon struck one in the face, sending him reeling, while Jack charged the other, disarming him in a flurry of swift, practiced movements. "Run, Emily!" Jack shouted as he wrestled with the second guard. Emily hesitated, her small frame trembling, but the urgency in Jack's voice propelled her into motion. She bolted down the corridor, her bare feet slapping against the cold tile. Jack dispatched the guard with a well-placed blow and turned his attention back to the man with the triangle tattoo. But the man wasn't chasing Emily. He stood calmly, watching Jack with an air of calculated detachment. "You've been impressive, Mr. Morrison," the man said, his voice unervingly even. "But you're out of your depth. Do you even know what she is?" Jack's chest heaved as he caught his breath, his eyes narrowing. "She's a child. That's all that matters." The man tilted his head, a hint of pity in his gaze. "No, she's much more than that. You've seen it, the anomalies in her blood, the way she glows under certain light. She's the culmination of decades of research, a step forward in human evolution. And you think you can take her from us? From progress?" Jack lunged before the man could continue, landing a solid punch that sent him staggering. Without waiting to see the man recover, Jack turned and sprinted after Emily, his only thought to get her to safety. He found her near the emergency exit, struggling to open the heavy door. "I've got you," Jack said, reaching her side and pushing the door open with all his strength. The bitter night air rushed in, a sharp contrast to the sterile atmosphere of the facility. They didn't stop running until they reached the edge of the forest, where Jack had stashed a dirt bike earlier as a contingency plan. He lifted Emily onto the seat and climbed on behind her, revving the engine as shouts echoed from the facility. Floodlights swept through the trees, illuminating the search teams already fanning out. "Hold on tight," Jack said, his voice firm but calm. Emily obeyed, wrapping her arms tightly around his waist as the bike roared to life. They tore through the forest, weaving between trees and dodging low-hanging branches. The searchlights grew fainter with each passing second, but Jack didn't ease up. He wouldn't stop until he was sure they were safe. After what felt like hours, they emerged onto an old, overgrown trail that led to a deserted clearing. Jack killed the engine and helped Emily off the bike, his body taut with tension as he scanned their surroundings. The night was silent, except for the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. "We're okay for now," Jack said, kneeling to check on Emily. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though her face was pale and her breathing was uneven. "I'm fine," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But they won't stop, will they?" Jack's jaw tightened. "No," he admitted, "not until we stop them." They spent the next few hours in the clearing, recovering from their harrowing escape. Jack used the time to inspect the photos he had taken in the lab, scrolling through the images on a small, encrypted tablet Carla had given him. Each picture was more horrifying than the last. Children hooked up to machines, detailed notes on genetic modifications, and diagrams of experiments that defied comprehension. "This is it," Jack muttered to himself. "This is the proof we need to shut them down." But as he continued scrolling, one image stopped him cold. It was a document labeled Project Genesis, Phase 2, accompanied by a list of names. At the top of the list was Emily's full name, followed by the chilling words, "Primary Subject." Jack's hands trembled as he read the description. Emily wasn't just another victim of Hope Harbor's experiments. She was central to their plans. According to the document, her unique genetic makeup made her the perfect candidate for something called adaptive integration, a process designed to merge human DNA with non-human elements to create a new hybrid species. "They're planning something bigger," Jack said aloud, his voice filled with dread. "Emily, this isn't just about you. It's about everyone." Emily sat silently, her small form hunched over as if trying to disappear. Jack moved closer, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We're going to stop them," he said firmly, "but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Emily nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with tears. "I trust you," she whispered. The horrifying truth about Hope Harbor has come to light, but the fight is far from over. With Emily at the center of their plans, Jack must navigate an even more dangerous path to expose the organization and protect her at all costs. But as they prepare for the final confrontation, one question remains. Can they truly escape the clutches of an organization this powerful? Stay with us, because the next chapter will reveal the shocking climax and the ultimate cost of the fight for freedom. The cold morning air bit at Jack's skin as he paced the edge of the clearing. Emily sat nearby, wrapped in a blanket, her knees drawn to her chest. She hadn't said much since they discovered the truth about her role in Hope Harbor's plans, and Jack couldn't blame her. What she'd endured and what lay ahead would crush most adults. But Emily wasn't just any child. She was strong, resourceful, and determined. And Jack had vowed to protect her, no matter what it took. They were running out of time. The man with the triangle tattoo and his team wouldn't rest until they found Emily. And now that Jack understood her importance to their twisted project, he knew the stakes were even higher than he'd imagined. Hope Harbor's ambitions weren't just about creating a new kind of human. They were about control, power, and a future where people like Emily would be used as tools, not individuals. Jack pulled out the tablet, scrolling again through the photos and documents he had taken. Each image felt like a punch to the gut. Rows of children hooked up to machines, grotesque modifications, and cryptic notes about Phase 2. It wasn't just an experiment. It was a program, one that had been in motion for decades. The more he read, the more he realized how deeply Hope Harbor's influence ran. Scientists, military officials, and corporate executives all complicit in a conspiracy that reached far beyond the walls of the facility. Carla's voice crackled through the handheld radio, breaking Jack's train of thought. "Jack, are you there?" "I'm here," Jack replied, keeping his voice low. "What did you find?" Carla's tone was urgent. "I've traced some of the funding streams connected to Hope Harbor. It's worse than we thought. They've got ties to high-level government officials and international organizations. This isn't just one facility, it's part of a global network. If you're going to expose them, you need more than the photos you took. You need hard evidence that links their operations to the people funding them." Jack pinched the bridge of his nose, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I don't know if we can get back into the facility. Security was tight enough a first time, and now they know we're out here." Carla hesitated before responding. "There's another way. I dug up an old blueprint of the facility. There's a secure server room in the East Wing. It houses all their data. If you can access it, you can download everything. Financial records, project notes, personnel files. It'll be enough to blow this thing wide open. Jack glanced at Emily, who was staring into the distance, her expression unreadable. We'll do it, he said finally. But we'll need a distraction to get in. Carla's voice softened. Are you sure about this, Jack? Once you go back in there, there's no turning back. I'm sure, Jack said firmly. This ends now. As night fell, Jack and Emily prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most dangerous mission of their lives. Using supplies, Carla had arranged to be dropped at a nearby location. Jack fashioned a crude but effective plan. He would enter the facility through a maintenance tunnel to bypass the main security checkpoints. Emily, despite Jack's initial protests, insisted on coming with him. You'll need me, she said, her voice steady. I know the layout better than anyone. Jack reluctantly agreed, knowing she was right. But he also made her promise to stay close and follow his lead. The tunnel was narrow and damp, the sound of dripping water echoing around them as they moved. Jack led the way, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Emily stayed close behind, her small hand clutching the back of his jacket. Every step brought them closer to the facility and the danger waiting inside. They emerged in a storage room filled with unused equipment and crates stamped with the Hope Harbor logo. Jack peeked through the door, scanning the corridor beyond. It was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made his instincts scream. He motioned for Emily to follow, and they slipped into the hallway, their footsteps muffled by the tiled floor. Their first objective was the server room. According to Carla's blueprint, it was located in the east wing, past a series of secured doors. Jack used the stolen access card to bypass the locks, each successful beep sending a small wave of relief through him. But he knew it wouldn't last. Sooner or later, someone would notice their presence. As they approached the server room, Emily tugged on Jack's sleeve, her eyes wide with alarm. They're coming, she whispered. Jack froze, listening intently. Sure enough, the faint sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. He grabbed Emily and ducked into a nearby alcove, pressing them both against the wall. Seconds later, 2 guards passed by, their conversations low but tense. They've doubled the patrol since last night, one of them said. That guy Morrison is still out there, and they think he's got the girl. We'd better find them fast, the other guard replied. Dr. Dawes is losing patience. Jack's grip on Emily tightened. Dr. Dawes. The name sent a chill down his spine. The man behind Hope Harbor's twisted experiments was here. Once the guards were out of sight, Jack and Emily continued toward the server room. They reached it without further incident, and Jack used the access card to unlock the door. Inside, rows of humming servers stretched across the room, their blinking lights casting an eerie glow. Jack quickly located the central terminal and inserted a USB drive Carla had provided. This will take a few minutes, he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Keep an eye on the door. Emily nodded, standing watch as Jack worked. The download bar inched forward agonizingly slowly, every second feeling like an eternity. Jack's heart pounded as he kept one eye on the screen and the other on the door. He knew they were running out of time. Just as the download reached 95%, the alarm sounded. Red lights flashed, and a voice blared over the intercom. Intruder alert. All personnel to lock down positions. They know we're here, Emily said, her voice trembling. Jack grabbed a USB drive as the download completed, shoving it into his pocket. Time to go, he said. They sprinted out of the server room, their path now swarming with guards. Jack led Emily through a maze of corridors, using every trick he knew to evade capture. But the facility was on high alert, and their options were rapidly dwindling. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with Dr. Dawes himself. The older man's eyes gleamed with a mix of curiosity and malice as he looked at Emily. You can't save her, Mr. Morrison, Dawes said, his voice cold and measured. She belongs here. She's the future. Not your future, Jack shot back, stepping protectively in front of Emily. Dawes tilted his head, a small smile playing on his lips. You think you're a hero, but you're just a distraction. She'd come back to us, one way or another. Jack's mind raced. They needed a way out, but Dawes' words gnawed at him. What did he mean? Was there something about Emily he didn't yet understand? Jack and Emily are cornered, and the sinister Dr. Dawes holds secrets that could change everything. Can they escape the facility with the evidence they've stolen? Or will Dawes' cryptic warnings about Emily prove true? The battle for survival is reaching its breaking point, and the final showdown is just ahead. Don't miss what happens next. Jack stood firm, his body shielding Emily from Dr. Dawes' piercing gaze. Behind the scientist, the sterile corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, lined with reinforced doors and the flickering red of emergency lights. Guards flanked Dawes, their weapons raised but not firing, waiting for his command. Jack's mind raced, searching for an opening, a way to escape the tightening noose. You think you're saving her, but you don't understand, Dawes continued, his voice smooth and unsettling. Emily isn't just a child. She's the culmination of everything we've worked for decades of research, millions of dollars, countless sacrifices. And now you want to take her away? She's a person, Jack shot back, his voice steady despite the rising tension. Not a science experiment, not a tool for your sick ambitions. Dawes smirked, his confidence unshaken. Do you really think she's just another person? You've seen the anomalies in her blood, the way her body reacts to stimuli. Do you even know what she's capable of? Jack clenched his fists. Whatever she's capable of, it's not yours to control. At that moment, Emily stepped out from behind Jack, her small frame trembling but resolute. Her voice was soft but steady as she addressed Dawes. I remember what you did, she said. To me, to the others. You said it was for the future, but it was torture. You hurt us. Dawes' smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of something almost human regret, or perhaps recognition of a truth he couldn't deny. Progress requires pain, he said finally, though the words lacked conviction. You'll understand someday. No, Emily said firmly. I won't. The air was electric, tension building like a storm about to break. Jack could feel it, an unspoken signal that things were about to escalate. Dawes took a step forward, his hand outstretched toward Emily, but Jack moved faster. With a swift motion, he pulled a flashbang from his pocket, a last-minute addition to his gear, and threw it to the ground. The device detonated with a deafening bang and a blinding flash of light. Jack grabbed Emily's hand and bolted, their movements swift and instinctive as the guards stumbled in confusion. Alarms blared, and chaos erupted around them, but Jack's focus was singular. Get Emily out, no matter the cost. They raced through the labyrinthine corridors, Jack's military training guiding them as he anticipated patrol routes and navigated toward the exit. The stolen data in his pocket felt like a burning weight, a reminder of the truth they carried and the enemies it had created. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder footsteps, shouts, a distant crackle of radios. As they neared the outer perimeter, Jack spotted the maintenance tunnel they had used to enter. He ushered Emily inside, pausing only to seal the door behind them. The tunnel was dark and damp, the air thick with the scent of mildew, but it was their best chance at escaping unnoticed. Keep moving, Jack urged, his voice low but firm. Emily nodded, her small frame pushing forward despite the exhaustion etched into her features. Halfway through the tunnel, a sound stopped them cold. The faint hum of machinery, growing louder with each passing second. Jack's heart sank as he realized what it was, likely equipped with thermal imaging, scanning the area for signs of life. Stay close, Jack whispered, pulling Emily into a side alcove. He pressed her against the wall, his body shielding hers as the hum grew deafening. A faint red glow illuminated the tunnel as the drone passed, its camera swiveling methodically. Jack held his breath, every muscle in his body tensed. After what felt like an eternity, the drone moved on, its hum fading into the distance. Jack exhaled slowly, his grip on Emily tightening. We're not out of this yet, he said, his voice a mix of determination and fatigue. They emerged from the tunnel into the forest, the cold night air a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of the facility. Jack led Emily to the dirt bike they had stashed earlier, its presence a small beacon of hope in the darkness. He lifted her onto the seat, climbing on behind her as the engine roared to life. The ride through the forest was a blur of speed and adrenaline, Jack's focus laser-sharp as he navigated the uneven terrain. The facility's searchlights swept the trees in the distance, a constant reminder of the danger they had barely escaped. But Jack refused to look back. Forward was the only direction that mattered. They reached the clearing just before dawn, the first rays of sunlight piercing through the trees. Jack killed the engine and helped Emily off the bike, his own legs unsteady from the ride. They had made it out, but the weight of what they had seen and done hung heavy in the air. Emily sat on a fallen log, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked at Jack, her wide eyes filled with questions. "What now?" she asked softly. Jack knelt in front of her, his gaze steady. "Now we expose them," he said. "We take everything we found, your story, the data, the photos, and we show the world what they've done. But will it stop them?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "They're so powerful." Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. His voice steady despite the exhaustion etched into every fiber of his being. "They might be powerful, Emily, but they're not untouchable. The truth is their greatest weakness. If we can get this out to the right people, it won't just stop them. It'll make sure they can never do this again." Emily nodded slowly, but the uncertainty lingered in her eyes. "And the others?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The ones still there?" The question hit Jack like a punch to the gut. He had seen the children in those chambers, their blank stares and frail bodies haunting his every thought. Leaving them behind felt like a failure, a compromise he was unwilling to make. But right now, getting Emily to safety and exposing Hope Harbor's operations was their best chance at saving everyone. "We'll go back for them," Jack said firmly, his words both a promise and a declaration. "Once we've brought this into the light, we'll make sure they're rescued. I won't stop until they're free." Emily's expression softened, a faint glimmer of hope breaking through her fear. She trusted Jack, and that trust was what kept her going. She reached out and took his hand, her grip small but strong. "Okay," she said, "let's do it." The next step was critical, contacting Carla and arranging for the data to be securely transmitted. Jack used a satellite phone she had provided, dialing her encrypted line. Carla picked up almost immediately, her voice crackling through the static. "Jack, tell me you have good news," she said, the urgency in her tone unmistakable. "I've got it," Jack replied. "Photos, documents, everything. This is enough to blow the lid off Hope Harbor and everyone behind it." Carla exhaled sharply, the relief evident even through the distortion. "That's incredible. I'll start coordinating with my contacts, journalists, whistleblower networks, even some international agencies. We'll make sure this goes global." Jack's lips pressed into a grim line. "We need to move fast. They know we've been there, and they'll stop at nothing to cover their tracks. We're already being hunted." Carla's voice grew sharper. "Understood. I'll set up a secure location where you can transmit the files. It won't be easy. They'll have people watching for any digital trail. But if anyone can pull this off, it's you. Send me the coordinates," Jack said. "We'll get it done." The rendezvous point Carla provided was an abandoned ranger station nestled deep in the forest. It was far enough from civilization to avoid detection, but equipped with an old satellite dish Carla's team had reactivated remotely. Jack and Emily made the journey on foot, the bike too conspicuous for the final stretch. As they approached the station, Jack's instincts went into overdrive. He scanned the area for signs of ambush-disturbed foliage, unusual sounds, but found nothing. Still, he didn't let his guard down. The quiet was almost too perfect. Inside the station, Carla's setup was waiting, a rugged laptop connected to the satellite dish and powered by a portable generator. Jack booted up the system, inserting the USB drive and initiating the secure upload. The progress bar crawled forward, each percentage feeling like an eternity. Emily stood by the window, her eyes scanning the tree line. "Do you think they'll find us?" she asked. Jack glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "They're probably already looking," he admitted. "But if we're lucky, this'll be done before they get here." The words had barely left his mouth when a faint hum reached his ears. His heart sank. "Drones, get down," Jack hissed, pulling Emily away from the window. The hum grew louder, joined by the unmistakable crunch of boots on gravel. They were closing in. Jack checked the upload 75%. Not fast enough. He grabbed his weapon, motioning for Emily to stay low. "Stay here. No matter what happens, don't stop the upload. This has to go through." "But," Emily started, panic rising in her voice. "Trust me," Jack interrupted, his gaze steady. "I'll be right back." He slipped out the back door, moving silently through the underbrush. The guards were spread out, their flashlights cutting through the darkness in erratic patterns. Jack's military training took over as he maneuvered around them, using the trees for cover. When the first guard passed close enough, Jack struck with precision, disabling him before he could raise the alarm. He took the guard's radio, tuning into their frequency to monitor their movements. "Perimeter's clear," a voice crackled. "Closing in on the station now." Jack's stomach tightened. He had to buy more time. Grabbing a handful of rocks, he tossed them into the brush on the opposite side of the clearing. The noise drew 2 guards away, their flashlights bobbing as they investigated. Back at the station, Emily watched the progress bar inch toward completion. 90%. She bit her lip, her hands trembling as the tension mounted. The sound of footsteps outside grew louder, and she pressed herself against the wall, trying to make herself as small as possible. Suddenly, the door burst open. One of the guards stormed in, his weapon raised. He spotted the laptop immediately, his eyes narrowing as he moved toward it. Emily's breath caught in her throat, her mind racing. She couldn't let him stop the upload. With a surge of courage, she grabbed the nearest object, a heavy flashlight, and swung it at the guard's head. The blow landed with a sickening thud, and the man collapsed, unconscious. Emily stood over him, her chest heaving, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The upload reached 100%. The screen flashed, transmission complete. At that moment, Jack burst through the door, his face a mixture of relief and alarm. "Emily, are you okay?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I did it," she said. "It's done." Jack pulled her into a tight embrace, his heart pounding. "You were incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us." But the victory was short-lived. More guards were closing in, their shouts growing louder. Jack grabbed the laptop and Emily's hand. "We have to go now. The evidence is out, but the danger is far from over." As Jack and Emily make their final escape, they must face one last deadly confrontation with the forces of Hope Harbor. Will they survive to see the impact of their actions, or will their fight for justice come at the ultimate cost? Stay with us as the story hurtles toward its explosive conclusion. The sound of boots pounding the earth reverberated through the forest as Jack and Emily fled the ranger station. Behind them, the shouts of pursuing guards cut through the cold night air. Jack's grip on Emily's hand was firm, guiding her through the dense underbrush as they wove between trees, their breaths coming in short, sharp gasps. The laptop containing the transmitted data was strapped securely to Jack's back, its weight a constant reminder of the precious evidence they had managed to send. The world now knew the truth about Hope Harbor, but that knowledge wouldn't matter if they didn't survive the night. "This way," Jack said, pulling Emily toward a steep incline. The uneven terrain slowed them, but it also offered cover, the thick foliage shielding them from the searchlights cutting through the forest. Emily stumbled, her small frame trembling with exhaustion, but she didn't let go of Jack's hand. I can keep going, she panted, determination shining through her fear. Jack glanced back, his heart twisting at the sight of her pale, dirt-streaked face. "We're almost there," he said, though he wasn't sure if it was true. The forest seemed endless, and the relentless hum of drones above made every step feel like a gamble. As they reached the top of the incline, Jack spotted a shallow cave partially hidden by a cluster of rocks. He guided Emily inside, motioning for her to stay quiet. The darkness enveloped them, the narrow space forcing them to crouch. Jack drew his weapon, positioning himself at the entrance while Emily pressed her back against the cool stone wall. The voices of the guards grew closer, their flashlights flickering like ghostly beacons through the trees. Jack held his breath, every muscle in his body taut as he listened. "They couldn't have gotten far," one of the guards said, his voice tinged with frustration. "Fan out. They have to be here somewhere." Emily reached out and touched Jack's arm, her fingers trembling. He turned to her, his expression softening despite the tension. She didn't speak, but her wide, fearful eyes said everything. Jack gave her a reassuring nod, silently promising that he wouldn't let anything happen to her. Minutes passed like hours as the guards combed the area. Jack's mind raced with possible plans, each one riskier than the last. They couldn't stay in the cave forever, but leaving now was suicide. He needed a diversion, something to draw the guards away long enough for them to escape. Then he remembered the flare. It was his last one, tucked into the side pocket of his jacket. Carefully, he pulled it out, his movements slow and deliberate. He leaned toward Emily, whispering so softly it was barely audible. "When I like this, they'll go after it. Stay close to me and don't make a sound. We'll use the chaos to slip away." Emily nodded, her face pale but resolute. Jack struck the flare, the sudden burst of light and heat startling in the darkness. He hurled it into the trees, its bright red glow illuminating the forest as it sailed through the air. The effect was immediate. Shouts erupted from the guards, their flashlights converging on the source of the light. "There, over there." Jack took Emily's hand, leading her out of the cave and into the shadows opposite the commotion. They moved quickly but quietly, each step calculated to avoid detection. The distraction worked. Most of the guards had gone after the flare, leaving only a few stragglers between them and freedom. But their luck didn't hold. As they approached a narrow clearing, the hum of a drone grew louder, its spotlight sweeping the forest floor. Jack pulled Emily down behind a fallen log, his mind racing. The drone was too close, its sensors likely to pick up their body heat if they stayed still for too long. "We have to move," Jack whispered. "Follow me and stay low." They crawled through the underbrush, the drone's spotlight just missing them as it passed. Jack's heart pounded as he glanced back, ensuring Emily was still with him. Her small frame moved determinedly, her fear tempered by her trust in Jack. Just as they reached the edge of the clearing, the unthinkable happened. A twig snapped under Emily's foot, the sharp sound cutting through the night like a gunshot. The drone's spotlight froze, then swiveled toward them. "Go!" Jack shouted, pulling Emily to her feet as the forest erupted into chaos. The guards' shouts rose again, and the drone's hum grew deafening as it gave chase. Jack fired a few rounds toward the guards, not aiming to hit, but to buy them precious seconds. They ran, the ground uneven and treacherous beneath their feet. Jack's mind raced with a singular thought. They couldn't outrun their pursuers forever. They needed an escape, and fast. Then he saw a ravine, its steep sides descending into a rushing river below. It was a dangerous gamble, but it was their only chance. Jack skidded to a halt, turning to Emily. "We're going down," he said, his voice firm but urgent. "Hold on to me. No matter what happens, don't let go." Emily hesitated, her wide eyes flicking to the sheer drop. "Are you sure?" Jack nodded. "It's the only way." With no time to argue, Jack hoisted Emily onto his back and began his descent. The rocky slope was unforgiving, each step threatening to send them tumbling. Above them, the drone spotlight swept the edge of the ravine, and Jack knew it was only a matter of time before the guards caught up. "Almost there," he muttered, though his legs burned with the effort. Emily clung tightly to him, her small hands gripping his shoulders. They reached the bottom just as the first guard appeared at the top of the ravine, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Jack didn't wait to see what would happen next. He waded into the icy river, the cold water stealing his breath. The current was strong, but Jack pushed forward, his focus on the opposite bank. As they emerged from the river, soaked and shivering, Jack glanced back. The guards stood at the top of the ravine, their shouts growing faint as the distance between them widened. They had made it for now. Jack and Emily have narrowly escaped, but the fight isn't over. With the evidence now in the hands of Carla's team, the world is beginning to take notice, but Hope Harbor won't go down without a fight. As Jack and Emily prepare for their final stand, the question remains, will their sacrifices be enough to bring justice, or will Hope Harbor's power prove unstoppable? Stay with us as the story reaches its electrifying conclusion. Jack and Emily trudged through the forest, their clothes soaked and their bodies battered, but they were alive. The adrenaline that had carried them through the night was wearing thin, replaced by the weight of exhaustion and the cold bite of reality. They had escaped the immediate danger, but Jack knew it was only a matter of time before Hope Harbor regrouped. As dawn broke, they found shelter in an abandoned cabin nestled deep in the woods. The structure was old and weathered, its roof sagging under years of neglect, but it offered a place to rest and plan their next move. Jack secured the perimeter as best he could, then turned his attention to Emily, who sat huddled in a corner, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. "You're safe now," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "They won't find us here." Emily looked up at him, her face pale and streaked with dirt. "But what about the others?" she asked, her voice trembling. "They're still there. We have to help them." Jack nodded, his expression grim. "We will, but first, we need to regroup. Carla has the evidence, we just need to give her time to use it." Hours later, the crackle of the handheld radio broke the silence. Jack snatched it up, his heart pounding. "Carla, is that you?" "Jack." Carla's voice came through, steady but tense. "The data's out. It's already spreading. News outlets, social media, even international agencies are picking it up. Hope Harbor's cover is blown." Relief flooded through Jack, but Carla's next words brought him back to the reality of their situation. But they're not going down quietly. There's chatter about mobilizing assets to discredit the evidence. And they're still hunting you and Emily. You need to stay off the grid until the authorities can act. "How long?" Jack asked, glancing at Emily, who was listening intently. "Days, maybe weeks," Carla replied. "But there's good news. One of my contacts in law enforcement has seen the files. They're already coordinating a raid on the facility." "It's happening, Jack." Jack's grip on the radio tightened. "That's not enough. The kids, they need help now." "I know," Carla said, her voice softening. "But if you go back, you'll be walking into a war zone. Are you sure that's what you want?" Jack didn't hesitate. "I didn't come this far to leave anyone behind." The decision to return to Hope Harbor wasn't easy, but it felt inevitable. Jack prepared carefully, knowing the odds were stacked against him. He contacted Carla, who managed to secure a small team of trusted operatives willing to help. They were former military and intelligence personnel people who understood the stakes and weren't afraid to take risks. Emily insisted on coming with him. "They'll listen to me," she argued. "I know the facility, and I know how to find the others." Jack wanted to say no, to keep her as far away from the danger as possible, but he saw the determination in her eyes. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a fighter. The final assault on Hope Harbor began under the cover of darkness. Jack and his team moved swiftly, using the facility's own blind spots to infiltrate the perimeter. Emily stayed close to Jack, her small frame almost invisible in the shadows. She guided them through the labyrinthine corridors, her memory of the place both haunting and invaluable. Inside, chaos reigned. The media exposure had thrown the organization into disarray. and many of the guards were distracted, trying to destroy evidence or secure their own escape. Jack's team took advantage of the confusion, neutralizing threats with precision and freeing the children held in the glass chambers. Emily played a crucial role, calming the frightened kids and helping them navigate the facility. Her bravery inspired everyone around her, including Jack, who marveled at her resilience. They reached the central lab, where Dr. Dawes was orchestrating a last-ditch effort to save his research. The scientist's calm demeanor was gone, replaced by desperation as he barked orders at his remaining staff. When he saw Jack and Emily, his face twisted into a mask of fury. "You don't understand what you're destroying," Dawes shouted, his voice echoing through the sterile room. "This is the future. These children are the key to humanity's survival." "They're children," Jack said coldly, stepping forward. "Not your lab rats. It ends here." Dawes reached for a console, but Jack was faster. He tackled the scientist, pinning him to the ground. "It's over," Jack said, his voice low and steady. "The world knows what you've done." For a moment, Dawes looked as though he might argue, but the fight drained from him. He slumped against the floor, defeated, as Jack secured him with zip ties. The remaining staff surrendered soon after, their will broken by the overwhelming evidence against them. By dawn, law enforcement and international agencies had arrived, their presence overwhelming and decisive. The children were evacuated to safety, medical teams working tirelessly to assess their condition. Dawes and his collaborators were taken into custody, their empire of exploitation dismantled. Jack stood on the edge of the clearing, watching as the children were loaded into ambulances. Emily stood beside him, her small hand slipping into his. "We did it," she said softly, her voice filled with both relief and exhaustion. Jack looked down at her, a rare smile breaking through his hardened expression. "You did it, Emily. You were the bravest person out there." As the sun rose over the forest, casting its golden light over the scene, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The fight wasn't over. There would be trials, investigations, and years of healing for the children who had suffered. But they had struck a blow against an unimaginable evil. And for the first time in a long while, Jack felt hope. Months later, Jack sat on the porch of a small house in a quiet town. Emily was inside, drawing at the kitchen table, her laughter occasionally drifting through the open window. She was safe now, living with a foster family who adored her, but Jack still visited often. Their bond was unbreakable, forged in the fire of everything they had endured. The world had changed in the wake of Hope Harbor's exposure. The organization's leaders were behind bars, their network dismantled, and laws were being rewritten to prevent such atrocities from ever happening again. But for Jack, the most important change was seeing Emily smile, a reminder of what they had fought for. As he watched the sun set over the horizon, Jack knew their story wasn't just one of survival. It was a testament to courage, resilience, and the power of doing what's right, no matter the cost. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this one. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a video, and share this story to inspire others to stand up against injustice. Together, we can make a difference. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and we'll see you in the next one.